Hi everybody, welcome to our Friday, let's call it a show, online discussion, but it's a show too, right? Sorry. And today there is Amy Asbrook on my right, and I'm Christian Debré from Toujours Vivant-Not Dead Yet. So, welcome to our online discussion of the 3 April 2015. Toujours Vivant-Not Dead Yet is a project of Council of Canadians with Disability to inform, unify, and give voice to the disability right opposition to assisted suicide, euthanasia, and end-of-life practice that discriminate against people with disability. There are many reasons to oppose the legalization of assisted suicide and euthanasia. Here are just few. First, it's unnecessary. Everyone has the option to commit suicide or refuse medical care and have palliative sedation on demand. It's the law. Already, no law had to be had to have this thing. It's already the law. It's discriminatory. Why people without disability receive suicide prevention services if they express a wish to die? People with disability will be encouraged and assisted to kill themselves. And it's kind of the normal way. Yeah. Okay. Choice is an illusion. The choice to die cannot be free as long as people with disability don't have the choice in and where and how to live. It's obvious. Here, people with disability have the choice between CHCLD, which is nursing home, okay, and nothing else, to die, okay. And this is a kind of choice between prison or to die. So some will choose to die. So it's not really a choice. If you have a third choice, which is live in an independent living, it will be easier for many people. And one of the best is safeguard don't work. Where these practices are legal, safeguard do not prevent people from disability from being wrongly killed. And it happened in a very normal country as Belgium or...
it's very frequent in the Benelux countries that people with disabilities who are not otherwise eligible are killed under their assisted suicide and euthanasia laws.
Okay, the goal of our online discussion: give disabled people a place to talk about this issue from our point of view. Recognize the effect of discrimination and our experience with the medical system. Establish our place in the debate aside from conservative and progressive. Called progressive. They are not so progressive. Okay. So today's topics: self-esteem. I will give to Amy.
Okay.
The speech.
So beneath a person's wish to die, you'll often find that the person feels they have lost or never even had any value as a human being. And that was absolutely true for the person that we interviewed a few weeks ago.
Yeah, a few weeks ago we interviewed a guy named Gabriel, who starved himself to death.
Right.
And he do it because he had a low self-esteem of himself after getting a sickness.
Well, he always had a pretty low self-esteem, and he was able to build self-esteem by working, and then when he could no longer work that made him feel useless.
And so, because he was useless, sorry for my English, he was useless, make him a good candidate for suicide. And he do it a slow way, a very his way to say is a safe way. He was in an hospital, and he died without pain and the less possible difficulty. Dying is never easy,
Right.
but less possible difficulties.
Right. And he died last Friday, so that was
Yeah.
pretty sad. Whether the person was born with a disability or became disabled as an adult, self-esteem can be seriously damaged by the effects of discrimination. And that is, discrimination is both the attitudes and the institutions that sort of constantly wear people down. Most people with developmental disabilities grow up in families where they are the only disabled person, which can make them feel isolated and different. And that was certainly the case for me. I was the only disabled person, and I felt pretty alienated a lot of times from my family. At the birth of a disabled child, parents may show a wide range of reactions. Some are not upset by the news. They do what's necessary to obtain services and supports to help their children reach their potential. There are some really great parent advocates out there, and parents who do a really good job just sort of rolling with the punches and say, okay, we'll just deal with this. But for some parents, it's a huge tragedy if they have a disabled child. And some parents feel that they've been robbed of their dreams for their child and for their own lives as parents. They may feel like they wanted to see their child graduate or walk their daughter down the aisle.
You
to
will
get married.
never be a star at baseball or
yeah.
football or
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah, and first of all, those things may or may not be true. But secondly, those are the parents' dreams. They're not. It's not the child's responsibility to meet the parents' expectations. So that's kind of a problem for a child.
Anyway, that's what happened for me. My father wanted me to become a doctor or a lawyer, and I became an electrician, and I deceived my father quite a lot.
Not deceive, disappoint.
Disappoint, sorry.
Yeah,
my
that's one of those
father
translations.
quite a lot, sorry.
Okay. Also, some parents even bring wrongful life lawsuits, saying that their child never should have been born. And I got to tell you, if I were a kid whose parent did that, I would feel pretty awful. Some parents treat it as a huge burden to have a disabled child and complain to everybody about how much they have sacrificed for their child. And again, that message gets communicated to the child, and they feel like their very existence is unpleasant for the parents, and that's they end up feeling bad about that. Yeah. There are others who believe the child's disability is a punishment from God visited upon them or upon the child, and people talk about, oh, I must have done something bad in a former life, or
yeah, particularly true today, which is what they call you in English. It's
Good Friday.
Good Friday.
Yeah.
So for a believer,
right,
it's a thing.
Right. Sometimes parents have very low expectations of their child, and they're overprotective. They stifle a child and impede their progress and potential. So the parents
don't run, don't climb, don't do nothing,
right.
and
yeah, you'll hurt yourself. Don't do anything, and children become fearful, and it makes it difficult for them to push their own limits. Other parents do the minimum possible for the child, leaving him to sink or swim as they can with minimum support. An isolated child faced with his parents' negative feelings about his disability, which cannot be separated from who he is, will have a very hard time having a healthy self-esteem. It's similar to the experience of gay children who learn that their parents don't approve of homosexuality. And I have a lot of friends who their parents had very negative views, and they never came out to their parents, and it had a really bad effect on them. They felt like they were bad from the very beginning because of that.
Yeah.
When an adult develops a disability, several things happen that can damage his self-esteem. If the person already has some underlying emotional problems, they will probably be exacerbated by the stress, loss, and grief that come with developing a new disability. So if you had some emotional trauma as a child, like if your parents got divorced, or you had a natural disaster when you were a kid or something like that, and you become disabled as an adult, that may make the earlier trauma worse. So that can cause that problem.
Yes.
The person who will be confronted by family members, doctors, social workers, friends, and a society that believes that disability is a fate worse than death.
That's something who happen quite a lot. Most of disabled people who just go outside and live at least one time, okay, I will be better dead than like you.
Yeah, somebody tells them that.
Yeah, and even with light disability, like Amy here.
Well, being blind isn't a mild disability.
Yeah, but it's not a very visible one. You could walk, you could you look like normal, and even somebody tell you that.
Yeah.
It's kind of very disappointing.
Yeah. Let's see. The person will be faced with physical and communication and institutional barriers, and he will find his choices very limited. Even if he can still do his job, he may not be able to get into his workplace. The disability pension does not provide a livable income. In fact, it's generally below the poverty line. His home is not accessible, and he won't appreciate having a different attendant every day. That is, if he can live at home. And he doesn't want to go to a nursing home. So from being a person who can live wherever he wants and go wherever he wants, he's become a person who has, his home is not accessible. He has very few choices of where he can live. Not only does he need personal care, but he doesn't have a lot of choice about who does that care. That can be very difficult for people to make that adjustment.
Yeah.
The person will notice that he suffered a huge loss in social status. He'll lose friends who can't deal with his disability, and other people will treat him differently. And I know that a lot of times people I know, or it's happened to me, you go to a restaurant, you're with a non-disabled person, and the server asks the non-disabled person, what does she want?
Yeah, it's happened quite a lot.
Yeah, and you've noticed that too. Yeah.
She wants something, and the sailor just talk to me.
Right.
Hey, that's not me who want that thing. And even some lady things.
Yeah.
I'm not the guy who will do that. She will.
Yeah. Also, the images propagated in the media of disabled people don't really apply to them. And if you think about somebody who's just become disabled, they're kind of lying in bed, they're thinking, well, what the hell am I now? So I had this image of myself. So now, what does this mean for me? And they will think about the images they've seen of disability, and some of the major images that you see of disability are, first of all, the bad guy, who always has a scar, a limp, a prosthesis, or some other external mark of his moral failing. And you can think of hundreds of, Captain Hook or Dr. Strangelove, or, any number of characters who are, the scar or whatever is the way that he's the bad guy. Yeah. The victim, small and weak. The victim awaits upon the charity of others.
For me, that's the worst.
Right. The person can do nothing to help himself, is generous, but suffers courageously in silence.
Oh, poor me.
It's Tiny Tim. He always dies at the end. This character often appears in films that show assisted suicide and euthanasia in a positive light. Yeah, so that's the victim. The overcomer, or super cripple. With energy, spirit, and courage, this character takes on one obstacle after another and succeeds in all he does. If he has a motivation problem, there's always a non-disabled person around to tell him to stop whining and feeling sorry for himself. The super cripple is there to inspire the audience, even if all he's doing is getting out of bed. So these characters are always played by non-disabled people who win Oscars for their roles. While we would never accept people in blackface.
Why not people, disabled people, playing roles of disabled people? And there's false reasons saying, oh, but what will happen for some scene where before he was disabled? Comment on appelle ça, makeup exists and there's
CGI
computer.
And all that stuff.
It's easy, and it's even easier to take that way than to do the opposite for most of the time, because for making disappear a leg or an arm, it's kind of difficult.
Right.
But doing the opposite is kind of easy.
And obviously, these aren't very realistic human characters. Right now, for the first time that I know of, there is a disabled person playing a title character in a major television program, which is called Game of Thrones in English.
A very
Ton de Fer in French.
Yeah.
And he's a dwarf, and Peter Dinklage is his name. So this is the first time that I know of that a disabled person has had a leading role in a television show. So that's pretty exciting for us. Reporting that perpetuates these stereotypes is another, way that the stereotypes are perpetuated, but also it has a negative effect on people's self-esteem. So all of this attacks the person's self-esteem. And when a person looks for emotional support, there is a pretty good chance that any psychologist or mental health professional that she consults will hold the same prejudices as the rest of society. So
and what happened is the person with disability have to teach his therapist what's happening and how to react before receiving the first care about what they ask
or during, which is worse.
So
when the therapist makes a mistake and hurts your feelings, you have to explain calmly to the therapist what a jerk they are.
And you have to pay your therapist to educate them. That's a very, very bad thing.
Okay, fine. So that's the problem. How do we solve it? First of all, recruiting and training more people with disabilities to work as mental health professionals would be a good start. Offering training to non-disabled mental health professionals conducted by people with disabilities. And, this is all through the medical profession. Provide peer support in hospitals and rehabilitation centers. It's less important that people share a specific diagnosis than that they share the experience of loss and discrimination.
Very important.
So people, generally it's assumed that somebody with a spinal cord injury needs at least, a couple of years to really get through that grief and get to the next step. But once you get there, the people generally feel their quality of life is good or better than it was before, whereas doctors underestimate the people's quality of life. So giving the person enough time to adapt and then giving them the support they need. Also, improving options for community integrations. Redirect funds from nursing homes to home-based care according to the independent living model of consumer control.
It will be a very great idea because it will be less costly. Somebody in a nursing home costs plus or minus $800 a week, and it's close to half when you do an home-based care. So if you redirect the money, you do some economy too. So the government's search for money, there's one way to do it, and at the same time to improve the care of people.
The person gets to control their care. They have more hours of attendance services. They can decide when they get up, when they eat, when they go to bed, when they go to the bathroom.
It is the same people most of the day who take care of them.
Right. And the person can fire the person, the attendant, if they don't work out.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question here, Amy?
Yeah.
At that juncture? What percentage of people have, I mean, in order to have home-based care, first of all, primarily one needs a home. So how many people that are in nursing homes actually have a private residence where that could be carried out?
Well, let's see. Part of the problem is the lack of accessible housing. In the United States, the Fair Housing Amendments Act of 1988 said that all multi-unit housing had to have a certain percentage of accessible units built, and accessible and adaptable. Now, that isn't always adhered to, because when civil rights legislation is passed, there aren't usually enforcement mechanisms, so people have to bring private suits. And since most people with disabilities are unemployed, the unemployment rate of people with disabilities ranges from about 40 to 80%, depending on the disability. Folks live below the poverty line for the most part and can't afford to bring lawsuits. So there isn't always accessible apartments for people to live in. And oftentimes in the U.S., people are sort of shunted to elder disabled housing. So they're living among a lot of elders, and that can be a pretty uncomfortable match or mismatch because of different lifestyles. So, you know, adapting a home, it depends on the home, obviously, but adapting a home can run anywhere from, you know, a couple of $1,000s to build a ramp to that up to the door to, you know, $40,000, $50,000 or more to build an accessible bathroom and widen the doors and create the entrance.
Yes, but even $50,000, if you do it for a youngster, you know, somebody at 20, 30 years old, it's worth it.
Right.
Okay.
But also the fact that this has been law for a long time, there's a growing amount of accessible housing, and you know, unfortunately, realtors generally say that it devalues a house that it's accessible. But with the growing elder population, I think that that may start to change.
Okay.
And one thing that people do to have live-in assistance is they may get an apartment. One person may get a 2-bedroom apartment so that they can have an attendant that lives there and helps with their needs overnight if the person needs to be turned at night. So the person either has no rent or reduced rent, and they do the personal care at night, either help the person get into bed or handle the morning routine. Yes. And then that person can go off and do another job during the day.
Sometimes it's very few things.
Right, exactly. You might have to get up once or twice to turn the person at night or whatever, so, and just to have somebody there. A lot of times people talk about needing 24/7 care, but it's not that somebody has to be awake and doing stuff all the time. It's that somebody has to be there and available. So generally, people underestimate folks' capacity to live independently, and it's because disability is generally very medicalized. People think of it as a medical issue. Yes, there are medical problems, but you know, if you think about a feeding tube, it's just a straw. It just depends on where you insert the straw. If you put the straw in your mouth, that's one thing. If you put the straw in your stomach, that's another thing. But it doesn't have to be as medicalized as it was. And both of us use CPAPs.
Yes.
And that's becoming less and less medicalized.
Yeah. First, they ask us if we need to modify the pressure of our CPAP to go to a clinic and so on and so on. And we find the trick how to adjust it for ourselves, and we do it time to time.
Right.
And nothing happens.
Right.
We just live properly.
Right. And you know, people with disabilities do that kind of stuff all the time. So generally, a lot of the personal care that people get, suctioning, tube feeding, folks think that, oh, you need a medical professional to do that. No, you don't. You know, just the person needs to teach someone how to do it, and they can do it.
It's just limited technique. So maybe the full act is medical.
Well,
but
no.
No, but think that self. Maybe the all procedure of all the thing to create the opening in the throat, it's medical. But afterward, just feed the people with a tube.
Right.
There's no medical thing. It's just a basic training, and anybody could do it.
I have a great video on my YouTube channel of a couple of guys, young guys like 12, 13, showing how they do their tube feeding. And it's really great. They're just a couple of kids, and they're like, oh, you do this, you do that, blah, 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 blah. So, you know, people think it's scary and say I'd rather die than do X, Y, Z, but, you know, when you get used to it, it's really not.
Most people who are handicapped for a long time really like their lives, like everybody else, most people at least.
Great. Well, let me just, I'm going to just give the information about how to contact us, and then we can get more into the conversation. To view our videos, you can search Euthanasia and Disability either through Google Hangouts on Air or through YouTube. To participate, every week before I do the video on our Facebook page, I put up the link. So you can do that, or you can send an email, and I will send back a link. For more information about what we talk about, our Facebook page is at Toujours Vivant, Not Dead Yet. Our website is at tvndy.ca. Our email address is info@tv-ndy.ca, and our Twitter account is @tvndy. So, Carlton?
Yes, Amy. Excellent. You know, I was going to mention, and maybe it's neither here nor there, but I think Christian mentioned this earlier. I have attention deficit disorder. I've had this since I was a child, and it's relatively serious in terms of how it affects my some things that I can do and not do. And I find it interesting in listening to you, because it seems that clearly there's a way in which my ADHD is maybe better than the disabilities you're talking about, and there's a way it's worse. So mine's invisible. So when I'm outside, when I'm in public, or I go to a social situation, nobody knows. So I'm not treated as though I have a disability.
Right. It's an invisible disability.
Exactly. The other side to the coin, though, is that invisibility has a downside, and that is when I used to work in the public sector and I have a job, a person who is in a wheelchair and says, I need a ramp to get into the building, the need is obvious, and hopefully they will comply with the need. Not always, but hopefully.
Right.
When I go in as somebody with ADHD and say, I need a closed-door office in order to get my work done during the day, they look at me like, yeah, right. And the response I always get is, well, nobody has a closed-door office. And I'm like, yeah, and so what? You know? So yeah, it is I think very interesting the way it treats people. I think, you know, I agree with everything that you're saying, and I clearly agree with the need for social reform and for medical reform, but I'm still not persuaded, and maybe as part of the conversation you can persuade me. It's still difficult for me to see that taking away someone's ability to ask for professional help in ending their life is the way to actually protect them. It seems like we are actually treating them like disabled people. In other words, we are saying we don't trust that you have the mental capacity to legitimately ask for this, and therefore we want to take the right away from you.
Okay. You can ask for any treatment from your doctor. It's your doctor's choice what treatment he or she gives you. And the doctor's choice is based on what his or her expertise, what their insurance plan will pay for, what that person thinks is appropriate treatment in your situation. And no doctor is mandated to give any particular treatment.
No.
If you say to your doctor, I am in horrible pain, I need pain relief because this is really awful. And the doctor says, well, I'm not going to give you an opiate because, you know, it's
Right.
discouraged and blah, blah, blah. You're not at the end of life. I'm not going to do this to relieve your pain. The doctor has made a choice.
Yes.
And you have not made, you haven't had your need met.
Correct.
And if that failure by the doctor puts you in a position where you're in agony and you want to die, and you say to the doctor, okay, you're not going to relieve my pain, I want to die. And the doctor says, hey, no problem.
But
Whose
again,
choice is that ultimately?
it is, I think, well,
So
I still think it is the individual's choice who is making the request. I think, I'm not saying that a person can't, and this is where I think maybe we have a disconnect with this. I'm not saying that there shouldn't be people there to if at all possible, alleviate the cause or the need for this request, or to oversee whether something happened that makes this really this request should never have happened because maybe the doctor made a bad choice. I think there needs to be, and I don't know how to articulate it, and I don't know how to structure it. I agree it's a very difficult problem. But I think ultimately, I have to believe that if the person is a functioning human being, that they should be able to, at some juncture, say this is what I want, and say that I want to do this with help, and they should be able to get that help. Now, I'm not saying that a doctor should be obligated to do that, but I do think that he shouldn't be penalized if he chooses to agree.
Okay. There's many things in what you said, and I will probably not answer all, but I will answer, I think, a few.
Okay.
When people ask for kill himself by the help of somebody else, most of the time it's not he want to die, it's just because he's crying help. Something goes very, very wrong with his life. Sometimes it's suffering, but a lot of time is a social pressure, which is I don't want to be a burden to my family, and I'm nothing for the society, or so on and so on. There's many reasons, but it's most social. That's what statistics for Oregon tell us. Okay.
Right. We talked about that a little bit before you came on.
Okay, yeah. But I just add on, okay, yeah. Please. And because it's a call for help, it's not I want to die. So first, but if somebody really wants to kill himself, there's no reason to ask to somebody else to do it for himself. Right. When it's done like that, it's because I'm too weak to do that, or something like that. Dying, it's never easy, even if it's by somebody else or by yourself. Okay. And if you ask for somebody else to kill yourself, it's because you feel too weak to do that.
But I can't. Isn't there a legitimate argument to say that if I wanted to end my life, okay, and maybe I want to do it and I want my family around, okay, but I don't want my family around while I put a shotgun to my head. I would much rather be in a nice place in a chair and a doctor gives me a pill and I just fall asleep and it's over. In other words, I don't want to have to feel pain when I do this, and I don't want to have to make it a nightmare of something to remember for those that I would like around me when it happens. I want somebody to help make it genteel as much as that's possible.
We lived that thing just a few days ago.
Right.
Gabriel, do
right.
it the way you talk about. He just starved himself to death in an hospital in a controlled environment. But nobody killed him.
Right.
He killed himself. He chose to stop to feed and have some pain medication to make sure that he doesn't suffer too much. And he just died slowly, and he could have as many people as he want to the end.
Right.
Okay.
And he was very, very, very a clever guy and a very clear mind guy, you know.
Yeah. Well, I see the point that you're making.
Add something there.
Yeah, please, Amy.
In this situation, there's a question of an individual's desires, and then there's the question of danger to many people who are oppressed.
Yes.
And an individual's desire to have a certain kind of death is being weighed against the danger to many people that they will be pushed toward a premature death.
Right, I understand
And in
that.
this situation, because we know that safeguards do not work, even, you know, all the strict and blah, blah, blah. We know they don't work. We need to decide whether we as a society want to grant certain people a privilege to dictate the time and way of their death at the risk of the lives of many more people. So, as it stands, a person can, you know, refuse medical treatment, refuse to eat, you know, go to the hospital, have palliative sedation, and have something very like what you think, what you were talking about, although we actually a few weeks ago talked about the problems that come up with euthanasia and assisted suicide. There are plenty of physical problems that arise. Or, you know, we can just sacrifice a certain segment of our society and say, we don't care about you people. These other people want their privilege. And the people who are really pushing this are well-off, white, people who are either non-disabled or just becoming disabled and are reacting from their fear. If you look at other countries that are predominantly not white, there isn't a big push for assisted suicide.
Okay. I can't address the racial aspect because I don't know anything about that. You're probably familiar. There was a girl not too long ago, recently, I think in Chile, the 14-year-old girl.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know who I'm talking about. And she had
Cystic fibrosis.
cystic fibrosis, thank you. And she had lost her brother, I believe, earlier on. He was 8 or 9 when he died, and she's 14, I believe. And she requested of the president of the country to be allowed to end her life. And her parents, which to me was the bigger surprise, agreed with her. I would think if I were parents and I had lost one child, I would fight tooth and nail for the other to not have that happen. But nonetheless, and she asked for this, and I guess the president of Chile is actually a pediatrician by trade, by profession. And he came and actually visited her in the hospital, you know, and ultimately said there was nothing that he could do. Do
you know that she retracted her request?
No, I didn't.
That happened this week, actually.
Okay.
She changed her mind. She didn't want to die.
And again...
And part of the reason was because she talked with other people with disabilities.
Right. Well, I think that there is a... I want to be very careful here because this could come out sounding very insensitive, and I don't mean it to be at all. But she retracted. She made a change. She changed what she wanted because of dialogue or it could have been dialogue, it could have been social pressure, it could have been a lot of different things, but she talked to people, and as a result of those conversations, she made a change to what she wanted, and we look at that change and we say, that's great. But yet we have another person who maybe as a result of talking with doctors, medical, nurse, or whatever, people, they change their mind and they say, I would like to end my life then. And yet we look at that change of mind as being an invalid choice because of the fact that there was influence from the outside. They both were influenced from the outside. We simply prefer, I guess, one choice over the other. And I know this comes out sounding very bad. I'm not sure even where I'm going with that. I think I'm just thinking out loud. I don't know. Is there anything to be said for that?
Well, you know, I don't know. The one thing that I can... okay. I'm going to make a point and then let Christian, but I would just respond by saying not killing yourself is a revocable choice. The other is not.
Okay.
Okay, and there's more complex thing. This is a society choice. In which kind of society do you want to live? A society who want to put life first, or a society who say just anybody who is not useful anymore have to go out. That's one crude thing to say, but that's what is the choice,
Right.
basically.
And we're not talking about pro-life. We're talking about a society that supports people to have the best possible life.
Okay.
We already recognize that that isn't happening. We need to change things to make that possible. But what we learn from people who do palliative care,
yeah,
and what we learn from people who do suicide prevention is that, okay, when people ask for suicide, they're asking for help. And that is the same thing for people who are asking for assisted suicide. The people who develop palliative care say that when those people have support, emotional support, when their pain is relieved, when their symptoms are managed, that desire disappears.
Yes. And just talk about numbers. Very simple numbers and not exact up to the point, but very, very close. Let's say that 95% who receive palliative care just end their life quietly and nicely. So it's 95% of people. That resting 5% of people. Over that 5 people, 3 of their 5% people had to have more than one reliving thing. Okay, they have to more complex palliative care, adding some kind of animal therapy or music therapy or both or more complex thing. Okay, so but it's possible to relieve them, and the rest 2% of people who are not possible to relieve from pain. And those 2% have already one solution, which is the palliative sedation, because they're suffering too much. And if when you are in coma, you doesn't suffer, and you end your life with what happened to your normal death, okay? And you could not have your family around you. You will have, but you will not be conscient with it because you are suffering too much. And whatever choice you made, it will end like that, okay? So for 2% of the death of people, you will sacrifice all. You not sacrifice. You put in danger all people who have disability, which is already in a normal life today on the population is way over 70%.
Yeah.
Okay, and it's growing fast because when you're getting old, you get some disability.
Right.
Okay, so it will reach easily 35% of the population. At the top of the
Okay. Can I?
Yes, Amy.
I just want to add one thing, which is that, oh God, brain fart. Go ahead.
That's what happens to me all the time. That's why I think I for a moment I was very close to being persuaded, or if not persuaded, at least understanding better the reason behind it, and maybe I still do understand better the reason behind it. I'm still, and this is more of a personal issue then, I still look at this with, I understand Amy's concern when she says that I'm sorry, what's the word that you used, Amy? Being able to kind of make judgment cases or oversee the requests.
Balancing the needs of the individual.
Yeah. Right. I understand that when you say that this does not work or it is not working, but on the other hand, I look at it when we talk about saying, do we put other people at risk by allowing some people to end their life? I can't help, and I'm not sure if it's valid or not, but I can't help to think of that the way we think of freedom of speech, in that we are obligated to tolerate some of the most horrific speech out there.
Right, but that doesn't kill people.
Well, no, I understand this. But I'm just saying in principle that we allow that in order to say that we have the other. And so when Christian asks, do we want to live in a society that values life or esteems life, I guess my partial answer to that is, yes, I do. But I guess in my definition of valuing life, I include the right of an individual to terminate his life how he chooses, and even if that includes asking other people for help.
Okay.
I can't see taking that away and still saying that we're valuing life.
3 points. One,
yes.
When we legalize assisted suicide, we're not just putting people in danger, we're sending the message that we as a society believe that certain lives are more disposable and less valuable than others. Because the criteria in all the laws is that the person have some kind of, condition or characteristic.
Change that law. I agree with you.
Right, but that's the problem. It's the legalization. Second, you keep talking about people can take when I want to take my life. If you want to take your life, that is your prerogative.
It is.
But you're not making a distinction between when you do it yourself, when you take the responsibility yourself versus giving it over to a doctor, giving the choice, giving the whatever to a doctor. The doctor has the power to diagnose you. The doctor has the power to determine you eligible or not for the procedure. The doctor has the power to decide what you get. The doctor does the prognosis. In the U.S., most of the laws are about terminal illness. If the doctor can decide if he or she thinks you have 6 months to live or less. The doctor can decide what treatment you get and whether that treatment would, cure or whatever. There's so many things that the doctor does in doing that interference that makes it not you making the choice.
But Amy, doesn't it, two questions about that. A, as the patient, if the doctor disagrees with what you want, do you not have the right to go to a different doctor?
Right, and that's called doctor shopping.
Yes. Well, that's fine. And/or is it not also possible that in a society where doctors could assist, then literally there would be clinics where the doctors have already said.
And that's pretty much what happens in Oregon, because the compassion and choices people basically field all the calls. They refer people to the compassion and choices doctors, and they sit in on all the assisted suicides and make sure the person doesn't, that things go as they're supposed to be planned. I just want to make my third point,
okay,
which is that you are thinking of this in an abstract, individualistic, intellectual way.
Granted.
I'm thinking about it from the point of view of me as a disabled person.
And the day-to-day life.
And the day-to-day life that I and my friends live on the ground, in reality, and as a person who has worked for social justice throughout my life, not just for people with disabilities.
Right.
I look at it from the point of view of as the society in what really happens in society, not just what might theoretically happen. And I think that a lot of people fall into the trap of, because they have a lot of control in their life, because they have enough money to get by, because they have a home, they have a car, they have whatever, because they have control, they forget that others don't. And this kind of law doesn't have a lot of negative effects on people who have a lot of control in their lives. It has negative effects on people who don't have a lot of control in their lives.
And if you think about intellectual thinking, that is not a right. Okay, it's very powerful. Okay, as intellectual thing, living is a right, but death is not. Why? Because a right could be removed from you. So you could remove life from a people by killing them. but you could not remove death from the people. It's impossible. So death is just a fact coming from the life itself.
Right.
Okay? And because it's not a right, you have to treat it differently.
Right.
Okay.
So just to say, Carlton, you're not going to convince me because
I'm not trying to.
I live this. You know, let me tell you my particular situation.
Okay.
I am legally blind, and also my upbringing was very difficult. I dealt with a lot of difficult home situations, and because of that, I have severe depression and PTSD and other shit. So I have to deal with some of the things I deal with as a blind person make the depression worse. Like if I go out and I'm on a bus and somebody grabs me, that triggers my emotional response because of the abuse I experienced.
Okay.
So if there have been times, and it could happen again, where things have been so bad for me, I might consider wanting to die.
Okay.
Now, if the society says that people with disabilities have this right to kill themselves,
okay,
or to have assisted suicide, and I am in that position. I am in such a bad way. I go and I say, I want to die. I can't deal with my life anymore, blah, 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 blah. And it's like walking out on a high wire and there's no net. For a non-disabled person who goes and says, my life is horrible, I can't stand it anymore, my husband just died, I lost my house, blah, 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 that person is going to get support for dealing with the grief of losing a husband, you know, dealing with the difficulty and unsettled of losing a house. But if I say, you know, my sight is getting worse, you know, my life is really miserable, people are going to say, oh yes, I couldn't, you know, the internal reaction is, I couldn't live if I were like you. I couldn't stand to live without being able to see. And without the net of the suicide prevention underneath me, I fall off that tie wire and there's nothing to catch me.
But what I'm missing maybe is I don't see that there is a net either way. As Christian pointed out, even if you make the law that it's not allowed, it doesn't stop you from going home and or jumping out a 10-story window, right? There is no net that prevents the person who wants to kill himself from killing himself.
There is an accident net, okay? People who try to kill themselves, a lot of time they miss it. And particularly women.
Well, more than 95% of the time,
yeah,
they
particularly
fail.
Women, because they use medication, and most of the time it's not lethal, or if it is, it is slow, and somebody catch them and
sure.
go back to the hospital.
Yeah.
But my case is quite different.
Mm-hmm.
Normally, I was not handicapped,
okay.
But I do have comment ça s'appelle
spinal stenosis?
Non, ce qui cause ça, c'est le...
Osteoarthritis.
Osteoarthritis,
okay.
In English, sorry.
But you should also tell him where you were before you met me, what your attitude was.
Oh, I was normal people that say, oh, to be killed, assistant, oh yes, it's a nice idea. I don't want to be capturing my body, and I want to take care of myself, and you know, you kill the dog or horse when they go bad. I was there 15 years ago, and without teaching, without imposing me anything, I changed completely my mind. Okay, and I'm becoming disabled because of osteoarthritis. It's degenerative sickness,
mm-hmm.
and it's quite heavy now, and I suffer every day. but the control of suffering is kind of good. But you know, around 4 or 5 o'clock in every day, things going not so good. I have to take a little more pill to control it, and I sleep never more than 3 or 4 hours in a row. I have to get up because back pain. Because when you go to bed, you go lying,
and we had to fight pretty hard to get him adequate medication.
Yes, it was hard. And the way to do it, if you say, "Please give me a pain medication, I'm suffering," you will never get. Okay, that's not the way. You just have to say, "I'm suffering, do something for me. I'm suffering." If you ask for medication, no doctor will give you. Okay, they will say, "Okay, take aspirin and go home. Call me back 2 days."
I can identify with that, Christian. Even with my ADHD, I take Adderall, which is amphetamine salts. And I promise you, if I go to a new doctor and say, "Hi, I need some Adderall for my condition," that's not going to go over well.
Right.
I actually, even my current doctor, I have to fight with her every time I get a refill. And we've had the conversation. I've said, "Look, it works. I'm going to need this until the day I die.
Right.
Why torture me every time I come in for an appointment? Not torture me, but why grill me every time I come in for an appointment about, does it really work? Didn't you try something else? What about this?" I'm like, this works. It works fine.
Right.
You know, and so I mean, and of course it's not at the same level, but I do understand that. I just
in other words,
I'll give it some thought.
Justify your existence to the doctor. Well, imagine that every single interaction you have.
Right. I can't.
That level of grilling, that level of whatever, in every interaction you have in the world.
Let me ask I'm curious. What, and this is probably not a fair question, but what percentage of people that are disabled agree with your position?
It depends on where you are. Probably about 60%.
Okay. And
part of it is that it's very difficult to get clear information, and a lot of people with disabilities are stuck with the same biased information that comes out in the media. I mean, you probably haven't heard most of these arguments in media coverage.
No.
Because the media doesn't have any interest in hearing from people with disabilities. So there was a study that was done by where groups of people with disabilities were given presentations by both sides on the issue, and basically after hearing from both sides, about 60% of people opposed assisted suicide for people with disabilities, and about 55% opposed for people with terminal illness.
You've given me a lot of food for thought. I will say that, and so I'm unwilling to say that I'm not going to change, because maybe I will if I have time to digest it more. But I was going to mention, because you mentioned sorry, what's his name from Game of Thrones?
Peter Dinklage.
Yeah. I was going to mention also, and what's her name? I got it here. Just in a second here. I always forget her real name. Marlene Maitland.
Yeah.
She was Joey Lucas on The West Wing.
Oh yeah.
For a long time, counselor to the president. So we do have a couple here and there, I guess. And Harry Potter has a scar. So.
Yeah.
But it was interesting when you mentioned scars. That kind of just a curiosity question. When we talk about what is a disability, well, I mean, I could have a cold. Well, obviously that goes away, but I have a cold, and that could make me, in some sense, disabled for doing work this week. So I'm assuming in terms of a disability, we're talking about something that is permanent or relatively permanent.
Yeah.
And to what extent does a disability have to affect someone before you classify them as disabled? I don't know if that was a good question.
Depends on the purpose. The Americans with Disabilities Act says that a person has The person with a disability is someone with a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits major life activities. Or if the person is treated as a disabled person.
Yeah.
So if I'm not disabled, but everybody keeps saying, for example, if I want to go into a restaurant, I used to have a guide dog, so I try to go into a restaurant with my guide dog, and Christian is with me, and they don't let me into the restaurant. Christian is also discriminated against based on his association with me. So he's not disabled in that context, but he's discriminated based on association. But the basic definition is the person has a substantial limitation of one or more major life activities. And substantial limitation means a significant limitation in the manner, duration, and duration and something else of how they do a certain thing. And that thing could be anything from breathing, thinking, walking, seeing, hearing. It's a fairly broad scope. Basically, in the ADA, they weren't going after diagnoses. They're going after functional limitations.
Right. So if you can do your job with an accommodation, then you're not considered disabled.
Well, no, it's not quite accurate, because if you are otherwise qualified to do your job, and you have a disability and you're being discriminated against, they're saying you can't do your job, then they need to give you a reasonable accommodation to enable you to do your job. That doesn't mean you're not disabled. It just means you're disabled doing your job.
I found with ADHD, and again, I'd be curious to hear how you feel about it. I work for myself now, but prior, when I worked for other people, I'm a software developer. When I worked for other people, one of the horrific questions that I had to deal with was, when, if ever, do I disclose the ADHD?
Yeah.
If I disclose it during the interview process, I pretty much am guaranteeing myself I'm not going to get considered.
Yeah.
They won't say that, but it'll go to the bottom of the pile.
Yeah.
If I wait and disclose it after I'm already working, then I'm kind of gotten there under deceitful means, so to speak.
They're going to claim that it was false pretenses, blah, blah, blah.
Exactly.
So, yeah, basically you're damned
lose.
if you do, damned if you don't.
Right.
And, which is what we mean by passing a civil rights law does not mean that your problems are over. And, that's an eternal debate in the disability community.
Yep.
And it's like, when do you want to confront the discrimination? Before or after you get hired?
Yeah, exactly. And again, it's like a lot of these things. I don't have an easy answer or a quick answer to that either. But I appreciate you having me on the show.
Yeah.
I've watched it several times, and so every once in a while I'll watch it in French just to see if I can pick out any words.
Yeah, unfortunately, my accent sucks, and his accent is pretty easy to understand because it's a mix of French and Quebecois. So.
Yes. My mother was French.
Yeah.
She still is.
She still is. Yes, it's a permanent disability.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Sorry, it's a joke. I know that.
My wife is from South America, so I have the same issue with Spanish.
Yeah. Okay.
Anyway, thank you very, very much for letting me be on the show, guys.
Okay, thanks. Take care.
Thank you, sir. Bye.
Bye-bye now.
Bye.